Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The first time I saw her standing at the edge of her balcony, the soft evening light catching her hair like liquid gold, I didn't realize a single sentence could shift everything. "Come closer. It's hard to hear you from there," she said, her voice a gentle pull I couldn't resist. There was something in the way she lingered near the railing, a quiet confidence wrapped in vulnerability that made the air between us tremble with unspoken tension. I stepped forward, feeling the brush of her gaze like electricity, and suddenly the familiar walls of our mundane neighborhood felt charged, alive with possibility. We had known each other casually for months, nodding across hallways, exchanging polite smiles, sharing moments that were safe and distant. Yet tonight, something fragile and magnetic had been set into motion. It was in the tilt of her head, the subtle curve of her lips, the way her fingers clutched the balcony's edge as if grounding herself against a pull she couldn't name. My own hands itched to reach out, yet something, fear, desire, or the weight of what could be, held me back. Every second stretched longer than the last, filled with the quiet symphony of anticipation. She leaned slightly, a whisper of movement that invited closer, and my chest tightened. Who was she, really? And why did her presence make the air taste different, heavier, almost intimate in its restraint? I wondered if she sensed the same heat I did, an invisible thread weaving between us, a silent acknowledgement of the forbidden or the unresolved. There were rules we had never spoken aloud, walls we had never crossed. Yet in that instant, the boundaries felt porous, fragile, teasing the possibility of crossing lines that had always kept us apart. I hesitated, caught in the electric pause between heartbeats, aware that something irreversible might start with just one step closer. Her eyes held me in a balance between curiosity and warning, a storm and a calm at once. And then, just as I leaned forward, something in the shift of her expression made my pulse stutter. The world outside blurred into insignificance. Everything, every polite hello, every accidental glance, had been leading to this delicate precipice. And just like that, the air around us hummed, waiting for a choice neither of us could predict. I stayed frozen for a heartbeat, unsure if moving closer would shatter the fragile line we'd been dancing on, or finally let us cross it. She didn't step back. Instead, she shifted slightly, the light catching a strand of hair that had fallen across her face. There was something in the tilt of her head, the almost imperceptible arch of her eyebrow, that drew me closer without a word. Every instinct screamed to close the space between us, yet another part of me hesitated, aware of the invisible rules we had never spoken aloud. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice barely rising above the evening breeze. It sounded ordinary, but the way she said it, the subtle tremor in her words, made my chest tighten. I nodded, but my words felt useless, tangled in the magnetic pull between us. Instead, I let my eyes speak what I couldn't say aloud, and she met my gaze, steady and unflinching. For a long moment, we existed in that quiet orbit, aware of each other in ways that neither of us could articulate. A laugh escaped her suddenly, light and startled, like she'd realized the weight of the tension herself. It was enough to make my shoulders loosen slightly, though the ache in my chest remained. I shifted, brushing my hand against the balcony railing, and hers brushed mine at the same instant. The contact was brief, fleeting, almost accidental, but it sent an electric pulse up my arm. I wanted to linger in it, to let it mean something more, but the fear of stepping too far held me back. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, she leaned just a fraction closer, the soft warmth of her presence wrapping around me, and I realized how long I'd been holding my breath. My own hands twitched, yearning to reach out, to trace the curve of her shoulder, to touch her hair, but I didn't. Not yet. The space between us felt like a precipice, each of us teetering on the edge, aware that one small movement could change everything. And so we stayed, suspended in that delicate tension. The city around us softened into a blur of evening lights and distant sounds, leaving only the silent conversation of glances, the unspoken ache of proximity, and the undeniable, growing pull of something we both knew we shouldn't, but couldn't help. Feel. The evening air had thickened, warm with the fading sun and the weight of unspoken truths. I could feel her presence beside me, even across the narrow divide of our balconies. Every glance felt loaded, a quiet explosion of desire restrained by invisible walls neither of us dared name. She shifted again, and the faint scent of her perfume, soft, floral, impossible to ignore, seemed to hang between us, mingling with the quiet hum of the city below. I should probably go inside, she murmured, almost as an afterthought. The words shouldn't have felt like a challenge, but they did, slicing through the tension like a soft knife. I nodded, but my body betrayed me, leaning just a fraction closer than I intended. Her eyes widened slightly, catching the motion, and for a heartbeat, the distance felt like it had collapsed. Fingers brushed against the railing at the same time, and the fleeting contact ignited a shiver neither of us could hide. We both smiled nervously, a fragile attempt to mask the electric pull between us. There was history here, untold stories, boundaries set by circumstance, and personal walls that neither of us was ready to breach. I wanted to close the distance, to reach out and let her know everything my words could not. Yet, I pulled back, not because I wanted space, but because the desire was too thick, too raw, too powerful to risk ruining the fragile balance we had maintained for months. Her gaze lingered on me, searching, questioning, as if she could feel the same ache I did. There was a heaviness there, the kind that comes from holding back something you can't stop thinking about, from knowing that the other person feels it too. My chest ached with the tension, the silent promise of what could happen if one of us dared to act. I saw it in her eyes, longing, fear, curiosity, and restraint all at once, and I realized she was fighting the same battle I was, desire tangled with hesitation. And so we stayed there, suspended in the delicate, combustible space between near and far. Every small gesture, a tilt of her head, the brush of her fingers against the railing, the way her lips pressed together, spoke volumes we couldn't voice. Each second stretched and pulsed with unsaid words, layered emotion, and the simmering heat of a connection that neither wanted to fully name, but both knew they couldn't ignore. The city around us seemed to fade, leaving only the narrow space between our balconies. Every breath I took felt synchronized with hers. Every subtle shift of her body, a conversation I didn't need words to understand. The sun had dipped lower, and the golden light caught her profile in a way that made my chest tighten, as if it had been hollow all along, waiting for this moment. She leaned just slightly forward, her fingers brushing again against the railing, closer this time. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears, aware of how small the distance between us had become. It was more than a gap in space. It was every unsaid thought, every moment of hesitation, every quiet yearning we'd been holding back. I wanted to bridge it, but the weight of the anticipation made the idea almost unbearable. Her voice was a whisper, almost lost in the evening breeze, but it carried everything she hadn't dared say before. I leaned in just a fraction, hoping for more, and the world contracted around us. Her eyes held mine with a depth that stole my words and replaced them with something far more powerful. Raw, fragile, and undeniably alive. Our hands hovered above the railing, fingers so close they might have brushed, yet neither moved too quickly. The heat between us was a tangible presence, pressing against the confines of our restraint. I could feel it in the taut muscles of my shoulders, the quickened rhythm of my heartbeat, the way her gaze seemed to strip me bare while also holding me safe. "I've wanted this," she murmured finally, a confession folded in uncertainty and hope. My chest tightened, as if the words themselves were a physical force. I wanted to respond, to reach out and let the moment consume us, but a part of me held back, savoring the fragile perfection of this pause. Her lips parted slightly, as if to say more, yet silence claimed the space, heavy and sacred. For a long heartbeat, nothing moved. Then our fingers brushed, almost just barely, and it was enough. Enough to feel the electricity. Enough to know that every hesitation, every withheld glance, every step backward had been leading here. The air between us shimmered with the promise of what could come next, the tension thick, unspoken, yet utterly undeniable. And in that stillness, we both lingered, teetering on the edge of something we could feel in our bones. Waiting, suspended, alive. The first drops of rain began to fall just as the city lights flickered on, painting the streets in liquid gold and silver. I didn't notice at first, too consumed by the closeness that had quietly built between us over months of stolen glances and unspoken words. She leaned slightly toward me, and the faint brush of her shoulder against mine felt like a spark in the dark, tiny yet enough to make my pulse thunder. Her eyes were wide, shimmering in the soft glow of the balcony lights, reflecting the raindrops that traced delicate paths down the glass around us. I could feel the tension between us loosen, softened by the night, the warmth of shared space, and the gentle rhythm of the falling rain. Every inch we moved closer felt inevitable, a magnetic pull neither of us could resist nor name aloud. Her breath melted into mine for a heartbeat, suspended in a silence that spoke louder than any words. The world beyond the balcony ceased to exist. There was only the electric gravity between us. I wanted to memorize the curve of her jaw, the tilt of her head, the way her hair clung lightly to her damp skin. The rain became a quiet symphony around us, each drop punctuating the moment like a secret drumbeat of longing. Their bodies spoke what their mouths couldn't. She rested her hand lightly on mine, her fingers tracing patterns that were not quite touches, not yet confessions, but intimacies in themselves. I mirrored her motion, letting my palm follow her contours without pressing, letting the warmth and subtle friction carry the conversation we had been avoiding for so long. "I've waited," she whispered, almost lost to the rain, and it wasn't a declaration or a plea, just an offering of the heart. I answered not with words but by leaning ever so slightly, our foreheads brushing, breaths mingling, heat radiating across the thin space that had finally collapsed between us. The rain picked up, drumming softly against the balcony railing, masking the sound of our shared breaths. Each heartbeat, each small motion, each near touch carried the weight of months of restraint, the thrill of a connection finally allowed to exist. Her warmth pressed closer, almost skin to skin, not in action but in pure, undeniable presence. It was a surrender of sorts, of fear, hesitation, and doubt, leaving only desire, trust, and the exquisite ache of being exactly where you're meant to be. Time lost its meaning. The city blurred into streaks of color, the rain a curtain that made the world ours alone. Every heartbeat, every shallow intake of breath, every tiny graze of fingers became a language all our own. And in that quiet, rain-soaked night, we let go, not with words, not with gestures, but with every pulse, every warmth, every silent confession that had been building between us. It was perfection, fierce and tender, a closeness that would linger long after the rain stopped. Morning arrived slowly, soft light filtering through the curtains, painting the apartment in pale gold. The city below was waking, oblivious to the night's confession, to the quiet surrender that had taken place just hours before. I sat on the edge of the balcony, fingers curled around the railing, staring at the blurred streets and wondering if she felt the same weight I did. The air was still thick with the memory of her warmth, her closeness, her whispered words that had lingered long after the rain had stopped. She appeared quietly, leaning lightly on the balcony frame, her hair damp from the lingering drizzle, eyes searching mine with a mixture of vulnerability and hesitation. We didn't speak immediately. Words felt both necessary and impossible, trapped behind the invisible wall of what had just unfolded. There was guilt, yes, for stepping over boundaries we hadn't defined, but also a strange, tender peace, an acknowledgement that something undeniable had begun, whether we were ready for it or not. "I didn't expect," she started. her voice barely more than a whisper. Her gaze fell to the railing, and I realized we were both replaying the night in silent fragments. The brush of fingers, the shared breath, the heartbeat of our unspoken connection. I didn't expect it to feel like this, she finished, looking back up at me, a small, nervous smile breaking the tension. We shared a laugh, soft and tentative, the kind that comes from realizing the world hasn't ended, that hearts can be messy but resilient. And yet, the questions lingered. Was this love, or simply the allure of escape from our carefully constructed lives? Either way, the connection between us had deepened, threading itself into the spaces of our thoughts, impossible to ignore. Just as the quiet settled, a knock on her door startled us both. She froze, eyes wide, a flicker of apprehension crossing her face. I followed her gaze, realizing that the world outside our bubble was waiting. Neighbors, responsibilities, secrets yet untold. But even with the interruption, the intimacy of the night remained. A quiet promise stitched into our every glance, every hesitant step closer, every brush of hands. And in that messy, golden morning, with rain-streaked hair and hearts still thudding, we understood that whatever came next, the night had changed us. Not with grandeur or words, but with a simple, undeniable truth. Connection doesn't always need explanation. It only needs presence. The evening had settled into a quiet rhythm, soft gold and amber painting the balconies in warmth. We stood side by side, shoulders brushing lightly, letting the silence speak. No words were needed. The space between us carried everything we had discovered in the past nights. The yearning, the restraint, the laughter, the confessions. Her hair brushed my arm, and I felt it as a message, a whisper of presence, a promise that neither time nor hesitation could undo. She tilted her head, resting her forehead gently against mine. The world beyond our balcony blurred into insignificance. I closed my eyes and let the moment unfold, letting the warmth of her proximity seep into the quiet corners of my heart. There was no urgency, no pressure, only the slow, steady pulse of connection, the kind that builds in the spaces between breaths and lingers even after words fail. "I think this feels right," she murmured softly, and her voice held a calm certainty I hadn't realized I was craving. I smiled against her temple, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, knowing that whatever came next, we had chosen it together. It wasn't a grand declaration, but it was enough. Enough to hold on to, enough to carry us beyond hesitation, beyond the invisible walls that had once kept us apart. We stayed that way for long minutes, letting the warmth settle, letting the vulnerability become strength. When we finally moved, it was slowly, naturally, fingers brushing as we turned to retreat indoors, hearts quietly tethered by the unspoken. The night had changed us, made us bolder, yet tenderer, aware that intimacy wasn't in action but in presence, attention, and care. And as we disappeared inside, the balcony held the memory of what had been. A soft echo of laughter, a trace of touch, the lingering perfume of a connection that had shifted everything. Outside, the city continued, oblivious, but we carried the night within us, hearts aligned, tempered by understanding, and finally at peace. If you felt the tension, the longing, and the quiet magic between them, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that pull at your heart and stir your imagination. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of romance, suspense, and emotional twists. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us which part of their story moved you the most or which moment left your heart racing. Your story matters too.